Alright folks, with America in the Walking Dead universe heading into a more stable era, I wanted to discuss the CRM's role in the future of the franchise and break down everything we know about them post-Reformation. The ending of The Ones Who Live abruptly features a newscast voiceover that details the current status of the Civic Republic following the destruction of their corrupt leadership, which I believe is instrumental in understanding the status quo of the world as we see it in Dead City Season 2, and contextualizes a lot of what I've been talking about in my Evolution series. So if you end up enjoying this video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you hit that like button, and drop a sub to see new content like this every single week. Now, a brief recap on why and how they were reformed in the first place. The Civic Republic military was born from the remnants of the Pennsylvania National Guard, who fought back against the federal government and Air Force to save the city of Philadelphia during Operation Cobalt, a last resort attempt to prevent the spread of infection by firebombing every major metropolitan city in the country only 2 weeks after the initial outbreak. This resistance wasn't without sacrifice, however, as the National Guard's leader, Major General Beale, allowed Pittsburgh to fall in order to recall their troops to Philly. And thanks to the last-minute switching of sides by an Air Force pilot named Donald Okafor, the Pennsylvania National Guard came out victorious in this fight and swiftly united their forces under the Civic Republic military name to protect the still-standing Philadelphia along with its population of over 200,000. However, the two still technically acted as separate entities as stated in their founding compact. Equipped with all their artillery and aircraft from the old world, the CRM quickly began scanning the country for other surviving cities, eventually coming across Portland and Omaha along with an offshoot known as the Campus Colony before forming the Alliance of Three, a union designed to help each other survive the apocalypse and act as a beacon of light in the dark. Although it mostly just consisted of the Civic Republic airlifting the other supplies as they couldn't provide for themselves for some reason. But secrecy was their top priority as they functioned as an isolationist society. Even their own citizens weren't permitted to leave without approval at the risk of exposing them, so their location was kept hidden from everyone including their allies, resulting in walker horde barriers and aerial attacks for those who got too close. However, around a decade after this union, Major General Beale began to hear projections of their society collapsing within the next 14 years if they were to continue operating this way, as they were the primary providers for their allies who offered very little in return. So developing a new form of chlorine gas to exterminate the living en masse, Beale would order the execution of the Campus Colony and Omaha before setting his sights on Portland next. However, thanks to the defiance of Rick and Michonne, who were forcefully conscripted into their ranks, the CRM's entire malevolent sector along with their corrupt leadership were taken out with a single explosion, allowing Portland to live as an independent colony, while the CRM reformed into a benevolent force intended to help those in the Wasteland. And that's pretty much where we've left off with them. However, I want to take a deeper look at what this reformation actually looks like and how they've affected the world in the following spin-offs. You see, this sadistic operation was restricted to those who had climbed the ranks high enough to receive the echelon briefing from Beale, which essentially described their true origins with the death of Pittsburgh and their intentions with the future in becoming the sole superpower in the world. This created a divide in the army. The regular black suit soldiers who were naive to these plans, and the red stripes who were responsible for carrying out these attacks. But as we know, the Red Stripes were universally destroyed in the explosion at the Cascadia Summit, which fortunately only made up a certain percentage of their forces. So from what we hear in the final voiceover, the Civic Republic Council based in the city had taken emergency control of the remaining army who were willing to make this change, having been ignorant to the deeper conspiracy, merging the two organizations into one while decreasing the threat of corruption, as every decision would now be made through a democratic voting process through elected officials rather than through a single commanding general. What's interesting is that through snippets of Civic Republic Tribune newspapers seen throughout the franchise, CRC oversight of the military had been in discussion for quite some time as they were set to have a vote in the near future. A vote that obviously wouldn't have mattered as a part of Beale's plan was to use the manufactured threat of their allies' destruction to declare martial law in the city and take full control. On this newspaper, we also see an article referring to a free movement debate that took place near the Civic Republic University, as many civilians believed it was a basic right to come and go as they pleased, which we also hear in the voiceover was voted on and unanimously approved by the CRC, meaning their citizens would no longer be restricted to the city just as they protested in the past. But this also meant the city would begin accepting new citizens as they arrived without the need to do consignee work on the outskirts for 6 years. In the words of the newscaster, the CRM's priority has shifted from defense to now engage with, assist, and even airlift any survivor or community they may encounter, meaning the days of surviving off worms and garbage were over, as anybody could peacefully approach the CR soldiers and either receive supplies or begin a new life altogether. I'd even speculate outposts have been set up for wandering scavengers to trade their looted goods for supplies, although I'll admit there's no real evidence of that. Rather, to me, it just makes sense from a world-building perspective. Think of thrift shops for Wasteland goods those within the cities can purchase rare items from, providing jobs for those outside the walls to make a living. We even see Rick and Michonne's CR helicopter approach and land in what's presumed to be Commonwealth territory without the army approaching. A pretty trusting approach, all things considered, before flying over with what looks like crates of supplies to represent their peaceful intentions. And to symbolize this new CRM, a new logo representing unity was established. In a matter of weeks, the world as we knew it changed to be a more peaceful place, which we have seen indirectly represented throughout the other two spin-offs. Daryl Dixon portrays some areas being so peaceful that random rugged survivors can band together to look for work without killing each other. These men even talk of having family members back home, implying many actually travel for their post-outbreak jobs in this new era, which I'd attribute to the super colonies expanding in the surrounding states, resulting in vehicles appearing back on the streets thanks to the production and distribution of biofuel. And we see this expanded on even further in Dead City as settlements are beginning to pop up everywhere under new banners, some of which even without walls, such as what we see with New Babylon. What's interesting, however, is that despite Dead City taking place 5 to 6 years after the CR Reformation, we don't actually see their influence anywhere throughout these rival federations. New Babylon is ready to go to war over Manhattan's methane production, yet we don't even hear a peep about the CR reaching out with supplies. Could it be the Council simply respects the newly forming borders established and has restricted that area's airspace? Well, it's definitely possible, although at the very least, given their close proximity, we should actively be seeing helicopters flying through the sky in Dead City even if they're unrelated to the current story. This could easily just be a production oversight, or perhaps the answer for their lack of visible presence around New Babylon and New York in the current day lies within the Season 2 premiere of Dead City. You see, we've recently learned, despite all the progress made, pests are beginning to devastate crops on a mass scale across the South, preventing the production of biofuels as corn was their main source of distillation. So what are the odds the Civic Republic could be dealing with similar issues, preventing them from taking to the skies as they've done since the beginning? It was never really explored how the Civic Republic got its fuel. For all we know, they could be tapping the oil sands like the good old days. But in my opinion, it's much more likely they were relying on fuel reserves from the old world, or much like anyone else nowadays, producing biofuel through alternative means. I'm not gonna pretend like I know what it takes to create helicopter fuel, but if this were the case and supplies were running low, the value of the Croats operation would expand exponentially, so perhaps the CRM are coming for Manhattan, but just haven't made their interests known yet. Regardless, despite the efforts made to reform the Civic Republic into an actual beacon of light in the dark, there are some lingering problems remaining that could come into play if they were to bring the CR back into the main fold. The first, we have yet to see the new CRM's relationship with Portland. As mentioned, Portland was nearly destroyed by Beale on 2 separate occasions. So how do they feel about their military continuing to operate, even under a new banner? Will they remain independent and begin reclamation in the West? Or have they already allied with the new CRM once again and have chosen to trust their new methods of operation? The East is beginning to feel structured and lawful, yet the West remains mostly a mystery, so I'd love to see if this sense of progression is present over there or not. The second lingering issue, the children taken from the fallen cities. Beale's plans were allegedly designed to set humanity up for the future, so a part of this operation was to extract all the children from the colonies before execution as they were the next generation. But where are these kids now? Are they in Philadelphia, from their perspective, living among those who killed their parents? You know, depending on how truthful the CRC really were. Or are they in Portland, living among strangers? This is a concept I find interesting, but have a feeling won't be addressed in the future. But we do know General Beale's son, Mason Beale, is still out there and presumably aware of his father's murder. So who knows? Perhaps it could be an avenue to explore and remix a certain comic plotline down the road. Third, Beale's spies. Now, we saw the chain of secrecy collapse along with the Red Stripes, Beale, and Jadis. However, during the Echelon briefing, we learned Major General Beale had loyalist spies implanted throughout various colonies in the Wasteland. And although most, if not all, the Red Stripes were taken out during the summit, we have no way of knowing if these spies were there or not. It's quite possible Beale loyalists could remain alive and hidden throughout the Wasteland or in cities, bringing up concerns of true change within the Civic Republic. However, if these spies were still alive out there, who would they be reporting to? The corrupt leadership was taken out and replaced by a democratic council. So without any real power, it's hard to say if these Beale loyalists could even really do anything if they wanted to. The only way would be to infiltrate the CRC, although I feel like that side of their story has kinda come and gone. Lastly, the 14-year projection. Beale was convinced humanity only had 14 years remaining, according to their scientists, as walker herds were becoming too powerful to overcome and disease was beginning to spread, threatening to wipe out everything they've built if they didn't start the process of cutting the fat. Many fans are convinced this was simply a lie to gain control through fear, and to be fair, nothing in Dead City particularly indicates the end is coming again, except maybe for the revelation pests are beginning to devastate crops en masse, so perhaps famine could be the first step in this second fall of humanity. Is there a way out of this if it were to be the case? Well, it's hard to say. With the advancements in biofuels through the Croats methane production, humanity may have the resources to combat this issue before it's too late, although it doesn't sound like those in Manhattan are wanting to play ball with others. So alternatively, perhaps the Civic Republic could begin looking across the sea for progress. As we've learned in Daryl Dixon Season 2, it's quite possible large sections of Great Britain actually survived the outbreak and may still be prospering today. And although this is yet to be confirmed, that same Civic Republic Tribune newspaper very faintly on the backside clearly says, "Signals from Europe," followed up by something to be true. Now, even if Beale was lying about humanity's approaching doom, this could indicate a future union between countries which could establish a full-on intercontinental trade network in the future. If crops are going bad in America, well, maybe Britain can ship some over in exchange for whatever. Weapons, aircraft, you name it. I've discussed the concept of reglobalization in the Walking Dead universe quite extensively in the past, but I truly believe this is the most logical direction for the series, and by extension the Civic Republic to take. they are still the largest faction we have ever seen, and we know other large entities are already active out there on the seas. So to me, it makes perfect sense for the Daryl series to connect to the wider franchise through these means. Have Daryl and Carol become CR liaisons in Europe in order to connect these sides of the world to build a better future. The Civic Republic seems to be committed to being a force for good in the modern day, to the point where they don't even bother other rival factions rising up in the Wasteland. And despite the lingering consequences of their old command's actions remaining, it seems like the Civic Republic is well on its way to mending those wrongs while continuing to build itself up as a superpower. Through their reformation, the American Wasteland is becoming a safer and more stable place, and although they still remain the most powerful faction in the country, their goals seem to now be in line with reclamation rather than domination. But who knows? With their available resources and powerful collection of minds, perhaps the next focus for the Civic Republic could be that of exterminating the dead for good. As we know, their scientists were actively working on ways to speed up the decomposition process within walkers. This hasn't been addressed since the World Beyond, but with this state of peace seemingly lasting and the era of expansion continuing, I'd be shocked if this plotline isn't explored in the future. But what do you guys think? Where do you think the future of the CRM will take us? I feel as if the story revolving around their internal conflict has mostly been resolved, so I believe the only route to take them down now is that of expansion and connection as the rest of the world slowly catches up in rebuilding. Either way, I'm excited to hear what you guys think about everything we've discussed in the comments down below. But that's gonna do it for me today, folks. As always, thank you so much for watching.